Right, so hello everybody, and welcome to the Introduction to Mammal Monitoring event that Kirsty has put together for us. I'm Emma and I work with Garnet Connections, and before we get started with the introduction to mammals, I'll just give you a quick introduction to Garnet Connections. So Garnet Connections is a landscape partnership project which is funded by the Lottery Heritage Fund. The project is based in southwest Scotland around the River Garnock, which runs from the Muirshiel Hills in Renfrewshire and down through North Ayrshire to Irvine Bay, where it meets the sea. On the map here, you can see the boundary of the project area and some of the towns within it. This area that surrounds the River Garnock, otherwise known as the Garnock Valley, is rich in cultural and natural heritage. With historic settlements, a varied industrial past and nature reserves like RSPB Lochwinnoch and the Scottish Wildlife Trust's Garnock Floods. So next slide please, Kirsty. So the overall aims of Garnock Connections is to engage with communities in the Garnock Valley and connect local people to the wealth of heritage that surrounds them, to enable the history of the area to be remembered and valued, and the natural assets to be protected and enhanced for species biodiversity. And to do this, Garnock Connections is made up of a variety of partners with a range of skill sets, knowledge and contacts to help deliver a variety of projects from archaeological digs to habitat restoration. Next slide, please, Kirsty. Thank you. So my role as wildlife recording assistant within Garnock Connections is to help deliver the Go Wild in Garnock project, which aims to connect people with their natural heritage through training in wildlife recording. And although it's no longer summer and lots of wildlife is no longer out, there are still lots of wildlife related activities and surveys that you can get involved in. And if you want to have a look at current citizen science surveys, you can check out the citizen science survey page on our website. We usually run wildlife recording and training events throughout the year and in person, but clearly this year has been a little bit different. Please do keep a lookout for future events that will come up. Some of these might be online like this one, but we're hoping to carry out outdoor practical events when we're able to. Next slide, please, Kirsty, thank you. So in terms of this introduction to mammal monitoring event, we wanted to carry out practical outdoor events for Mammal Week, but the current health and safety guidelines mean that we are not able to do that at the moment and the training has been postponed. So we're looking to carry out practical training at RSPB Lochwinnoch and Eglinton Country Park, but we're waiting for the restrictions to be lifted before we set a date for these. And just to be clear, these practical training events are an optional follow-up to this online event, and we'll send you an email to let you know when it's available to book onto. And it'll be a case of booking onto one or the other because the training will be the same in both locations. So I should let you know that it's very likely that there will be a limit to the number of people who can attend each practical training event because of health and safety guidelines. So the booking for these practical events will be on a first come, first served basis. Right, so that really is enough from me, and I will hand you back to Kirsty for the main event, which is what we're all here for. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Emma. So I know we're all introduction to OUT, but just as a very brief overview, TCV, for those of you who haven't heard, are the Conservation Volunteers, a community volunteering charity. So primarily we are interested in creating healthier and happier communities. So we support a lot of volunteers, a lot of people who are maybe socially isolated, who are slightly underactive, who don't get out in the community much. But my role is to kind of band all that together under the citizen science bracket. So we basically use science to get out into the community and to connect people. We're all over the UK, lots of volunteering opportunities. If you ever wanted to expand your horizons and come out with us in a whole variety, so not just mammals, we cover almost every aspect of environmental training. And there we are, spread right through the country. So if you have joined us from down south today or over in Northern Ireland, we've got an opportunity to suit you too. So not just Scottish based here. what we're going to do is we're going to go through what citizen science means and how to record wildlife more generally, but also with a little bit of a focus on a flagship hedgehog monitoring project, which I lead on. Then we're going to do some interactive stuff along the way, finishing up with a guide to common UK species and 3 surveys that you can get involved in right now. And then, of course, as we said, we're going to be putting together a really great practical package to follow up. So if the term is new to you, we tend to bracket wildlife recording in general under this term citizen science. So it is growing in popularity these days. And what we mean by that is basically anybody, no matter who you are, can get involved with some aspect of scientific recording. That might be monitoring river levels, the amount of rain that's fallen in a month. It might be looking at your window and taking part in the Big Garden Birdwatch, which is probably one of the biggest kind of public participation surveys that we've got out there. Lots of definitions up on your screen. We tend to identify with number 2, so a big community focus, getting everybody out and about in the community and engaging with science. So here, as we mentioned, are our 2 main kind of goals for TCV. So thank you for being here today. You're helping us to target that as well. We hope with the knowledge that you gain here, you'll be able to go out and about on your own and do a little bit of surveying and monitoring. So we're going to talk about why we kind of bother, like why survey, why monitor in the first place. Especially with mammals, we're in this sort of paradox. Everybody loves them, they're very charismatic, you know. Big organisations tend to use mammals as their logo. They tend to be the biggest seller for fundraising events. If you're trying to fundraise to save a kind of mammal species, it can be a lot easier than, say, an invertebrate or amphibian. But they're very elusive, like they're almost impossible to kind of see to a regular member on the public on any given day. We need to do some specialist walks, some specialist monitoring to try and see them, but yet the public have such a massive interest in them. So when we do these surveys, there's a lot of managing expectations. What people want to see, lovely badger out doing it, going about its business, what people actually see, some maybe set holes in the ground. We're also going to be looking today at tracks and signs. So that is our main kind of key to mammal monitoring, looking for holes, prints, poo and hair. Everything that we do, certainly as part of my role in citizen science and your role as well as members of the public, maybe you're part of a local recording group, it all ends up at this end point, which is the National Biodiversity Network Atlas. It is basically an atlas of all recorded living things. So you can't submit to this directly. There's lots of channels that you can go through to submit your records. And we're going to show you how to kind of go through a couple of those today. So as well as the public interest in wildlife, the main aspect of taking part in citizen science is to contribute scientific value. We basically can't protect what we don't know about, and you'd be so surprised to see how under-recorded really common species are. So that is where you come in to help us out. As an example of this, the flagship project Hedgehog Monitoring here in Scotland, in the last 30 years, there was 74 official records in this target area. So 74 hedgehogs in 30 years, that is absolutely not representative at all, and this is part of the reason how the Hedgehog Scotland project came to be. And that is a kind of broad picture across the range of mammals. So I've picked an area which is actually within Garnet Connections. You fire out to me some of your best guesses. How many brown rat records were in this section here of Garnet Connections of all time? So the yellow dots don't actually give it away, they can represent more than one. But how many rats do you think we've had officially recorded? We got any coming through? Emma?
We have somebody saying 30,
Okay.
10, 12.
Yeah, all right.
4.
Yeah, good. You're all aim low and you won't go wrong. It's really the same picture. So our badgers are one of the most charismatic species that we have here in the UK, and they're very active within that target area there, which is not too far from RSPB Lochwinnoch. But again, 9 badgers of all time. So to say that by you going out and even adding to the badger records by just 1 is making a huge contribution is not an underestimation. It really helps. How to go about it? Super simple, but it can help to just distill it down. If you want to make a wildlife record, the most basic way you could do it is just with a pen or paper. But within the pack that I should say all of you should have received, and if you haven't, we can sort that out at the end, is I tried to send you as many resources as I could. This mammal recording pack would usually be given to you in person, but one of the things that's in it is our standard recording form. So it's printed there on a sheet for you. We need 4 key pieces of information: who you are and how to contact you if we think the record might be incorrect, when you're recording, your location, and of course what you were recording. Now you can set up your own transect line. If you do a regular dog walk, if you have a regular route that you walk, a transect is basically just a line. It can be a straight line or it can be going through a patch of woodlands. And that just helps to add some sort of scientific back into it. It's great going out and about and you perhaps spot a kingfisher for the first time in your life. You tell us where you've seen it and when you've seen it. If you are walking that river route 4 times a year, you can start to tell us a bit of a bigger picture. So there's loads of different ways that you can get involved. Writing it down with a pen or paper, as I said, most simple way, but where do you go from there? So I'd like to introduce you to iRecord, which is certainly my Bible of wildlife recording. So it exists online where you can just go onto the website, but it's also on a really handy app for your phone. It's free to download. So the goal of iRecord, we think back to the NBN gateway that I showed you, that's the end goal, and this is a filter system. So there's hundreds and thousands of experts across the UK that volunteer their time to verify your records, just to make sure that what is going on there is accurate. So to help them do that, a photograph is always really, really helpful. If I just come out of this, and hopefully this works, I can show you that I've got it set up here. You log in, you create a free account, and you can go to records and enter a list of records. So from here, you're simply entering your date, and the species function has a nice search. So if I wanted to go after, say, the robin, and of course it's not going to drop down for me because I'm doing a live presentation, but it would drop down with all your different options, and you can select your species. But of course, as we can see, it doesn't want to work for me today. So you can create a species list, record the sex that you've seen, and your name and contact details help verify this. You can also go to where your record was seen, but it's really not wanting to play. I'll let you have a play around with it on your own. So if you go to irecord.org, you can have a play around, create your own account, and that is the best way to store your records online. Never try and do things live. That's one thing that we're learning from today. So you can keep that as a record on your phone with all your photos as well stored, and it really helps to build a good picture. And it's also a nice way for you to get involved in some of the national surveys. I didn't have enough room to put them all here, but I just want you to know that whatever maybe species that you're most interested in, there's definitely a citizen science option for you. From the Mammal Mapper app, which is one of the things we're going to talk about today, to volunteering with Scottish badgers. There's even a roadkill citizen science project called Project Splatter, which is absolutely key because we're trying to map hotspots on our roads at the minute. So many of the badgers, foxes, pine marten, pheasants that you might have seen over the years will unfortunately have been squished at the side of the road. But if we can have a map of that data and chart it, we can start to put mitigation measures in place. We've got hedgehog surveys, living with mammals that takes place twice a year, the National Bat Monitoring Scheme, and of course it's not just mammals, we've got British bird counts, British bumblebee counts, all sorts of things. As Emma said on Garnet Connections, there's a nice citizen science section so you can see what one would take your fancy. I'm going to pick 3 key ones of these at the end and go into it. For now, and this involves me going back into Google, so goodness knows what's going to happen. If you've got your phone handy, or you've got another device handy, I'd like you to take part in a little interactive Q&A. It's super simple. There's the address there. If even a couple of us want to take part, www.menti.com. And it's going to ask you for that 7-digit code. You're going to pop that in. As you get that set up, I'll show you what it is that I want you to answer for. We're going to talk about what makes a mammal a mammal. So you should see you've got a little box there. I want you to hit me up with some suggestions that what is it that we define a mammal by? What makes a mammal among us different from a fish or, you know, an amphibian, an invertebrate? What makes mammals stand out? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to fire in your results and you'll see them appear live in real time on the screen. Oh, very good, very good. Okay. Yep. So we can see lots of the same. I think this griffin has fur. Yes. Mother's milk. Lovely. Bearing live young, warm-blooded. Like us, exactly. We're mammals. Of course we are. We've got loads of cousins out there in the animal kingdom. Let's scroll down. What else are you saying? Fur. 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 Yeah. Gives birth to live young. Mammals a creature. Yep. Fuzzy as well. Yeah, of course. Oh, fab, everyone. Thank you for taking part in that. Whoever said tasty out there, we'll think what we want about that one. And behavioural aspects as well. Yep, fab. Okay, milk producer. Great. All good suggestions coming through. We're all on the same page. The key things that I had put down were definitely what was coming up there. Hair, fur, whatever you want to call it. That's the main one for me. So even if you're a blue whale, you've got hair on your body at some stage in your life, generally around the kind of tip of the nose area for whales and dolphins. So that absolutely sticks out. Mammals are warm-blooded vertebrates. They possess hair or fur. We also have a solid lower jaw and 3 bones in the middle ear, which is what that photo is in the middle. And another absolutely key factor is that mammals nourish their young with their own milk. So great, some really good answers coming through. What we may have not known is that mammals are categorised into 3 kind of separate categories. Obviously, the first 2 aren't exactly relevant for us over here in Scotland and the UK, but you've got your marsupials, so they set apart from other mammals, your kangaroos, koalas, Tasmanian devil, so they have a pouch where the kind of premature young develops after birth, where they continue to sort of grow until they're of an age where they can leave the mother in the pouch. Monotremes, there's only 3 species. That's the platypus and the echidnas, so the 2 photos at the bottom. What sets them apart is that they lay leathery eggs. So they are mammals, but they lay eggs, and they have no teeth as well. And for all the rest, we've got our placental mammals. That'll be the majority that we all know of, about 18 to 20 different orders. So mammals that have a complex placenta, that are giving birth to live young, and that are nourishing with milk. So you've got your 3 categories. In Scotland, within the placental mammals, we have about 53 species. So I appreciate this is a bit on the blurry side. I've given you a copy of this in PDF form in your pack. It's really interesting to have a little browse through it. So a couple of things might stand out to you. We've got a key at the top here, so it tells you if we've been reintroduced in this country, if they're natives, if they occur naturally, and on it, down to the bottom there, we've got red-necked wallaby. So if you're not familiar with the wallabies over on Inchconhan in Loch Lomond, we do have a wallaby population. I think they were introduced in about the 1940s and have been living there ever since. They are unfortunately a threat to one of the last southern populations of capercaillie that we have in Scotland. So I think there've been several culls over the years, but interesting to give someone a list of Scottish mammals and to see the wallaby appearing. Shout out to the beaver. We've got the wonderful beaver reintroduction trials that have been happening. So there was one sort of official and one slightly unofficial, but now we're kind of quite far down the line and we see beavers that are spreading through the landscape. But it's interesting to kind of note the code that they fall under. They're coming under kind of introduced or reintroduced. So they were hunted to persecution in about the 16th century, and now we're trying to see that aspect of rewilding. So lots to kind of look through there. It's a completely exhaustive list of all Scottish land mammals, so it's a good reference point. But the main thing to note is 53 is quite manageable. You know, you've got over 50,000 different invertebrate species in Scotland, and here we've got a list of 53. So it's quite easy to kind of get to grips with. I'm going to do the whistle-stop tour of Hogwatch Scotland, because this is a relatively new monitoring programme and I would love for some of you to get on board with it. Apologies if you've come to one of my hedgehog training sessions in the past. I think I maybe see a few familiar names there, so this is all old news to you, but here we go. So we have a 2-year project called Hogwatch Scotland. Our main aims are to survey for populations. This includes using spotlighting, which is using powerful torches to survey and then tag and monitor hedgehogs. We're completing a lot of new hedgerow planting. So much of our landscape is fragmented. So we're using native hedgerow species to plug gaps in hedges. We're doing loads and loads of planting work, and we're always on the hunt for volunteers. Just saying, if you fancy doing a bit of planting. Lots of raising awareness, lots of sort of spreading our message, doing loads and loads of school sessions, public events. We're asking everybody in Scotland, when was the last time that you saw a hedgehog? And I'll show you how to record. But if anybody out there has a record for me, if you've seen one this year at all, I'd like to know the location and the date that you've seen it. And this goes towards our large hedgehog map, which is going to help towards some decision making in the future. And we're trying to recruit a sort of network of volunteers and something called Hedgehog Champions, which I'll talk to you a little bit about. Hedgehogs are, well, they've been voted Britain's favourite species 2 or 3 times in a row. They've also been kind of advocated as the champion of our environment, the gardener's friend. They're hugely popular, really charismatic, but what people don't understand it is quite how serious the situation is. So here in the UK, and we've got the West European hedgehog, our only spiny mammal. Important to note that it's been moved up a category, so it's vulnerable to extinction now. This came from the red list for Britain's mammals. This is the first time this has been compiled. You can see the species that are on there in the category that hedgehogs fall under. There is in yellow, vulnerable. So they're down 46% in only 12 years, and we're starting to need to think about taking some kind of urgent action. I'm going to tell you very briefly a couple of ways that you can think about doing that in your own area. The situation looks like distribution for hedgehogs is very, very good. That means the habitat available is strong. There's potential for hedgehogs to exist almost everywhere in the UK. They're in almost every 10-kilometre grid square in England. You've got a thriving population in Regent's Park. Not so much in Pinewood and kind of moor and marshland habitat in Scotland for reasons that I'll explain in a little minute. But you can compare that with the actual population numbers. So we've got about less than 300,000 hedgehogs left in Scotland. There is a rough estimate that there was well over 30 million in the kind of 1950s. Rural landscape continues to do a lot worse. Sorry, my doorbell just went, highly distracting. Urban landscapes are faring a lot better. So we've really banded together suburban housing areas. We're doing a lot of supplementary feeding, people putting the food out for the hedgehogs, creating hedgehog boxes in their garden, and that is starting to really make a difference. Here in Glasgow, which was our key area, you can see that in the last couple of years there have been very poor numbers of hedgehogs recorded, so each colour corresponding with a different year. We have actually increased this now by well over 300 records in 18 months for hedgehogs in that area, and that's all thanks to word of mouth. So again, please do submit your hedgehog records. A couple of reasons for their decline. So this is a study that was done on the stomach contents of roadkill hedgehogs, but it gave the kind of first insight into what actually comprises in a hedgehog's diet. So the key things to note there, 6 things jumping out at the top, were things like beetles and worms, slugs, millipedes, caterpillars, earwigs. So these kind of creepy crawlies, invertebrates, whatever you want to call it, were actually forming the most crucial part of hedgehog diet. When you compare that with one of the main threats, which is how we tend to simplify or oversimplify our landscape, we sometimes are left with a picture like this. Maybe a typical street, we've got decking, we've got monoblocking, pulling out a lot of the natural resources and materials. And if a hedgehog is effectively looking for a buffet that's made up of these 6 items, they're not going to find them on the tarmac. So we're trying to put out a big campaign to be rewilding our green spaces. At this time of year, hibernation nests are very important to hedgehogs, and that's why we need lots and lots of natural habitat, but also things like kind of brambles and thorny areas are the most supportive for hedgehogs at this time of year. They make a laminated structure, so lots and lots of different layers of dry leaves. Obviously go inside, use the powerful muscles on their back to make this kind of circle structure, and that is where they'll remain. Hedgehogs can move around, so they don't sort of maintain a consistent hibernation, but they do prefer cold and constant weather, like many other species. So when we seen in March of last year, we kind of had that really, really blizzardy cold spell, but the February had been quite mild. So that's triggering a lot of confusing signals. A lot of hedgehogs came out well early from their hibernation and then felt like they were being forced back in as we saw this horrific weather coming in. But you know, it's just a fact, unfortunately, of the kind of climate we're living in. I say leaf structure is really important. There was a big study done about 40 years ago now that looked at why hedgehogs were absent from some areas. And when a study was done on different hibernation nests, one, it was found that this relatively unassuming area was supporting up to 10 hedgehogs each winter. And two, the trees that were growing in that area were of ideal size. So they use intermediate size leaves, things like beech, the fruit trees, apple, cherry, plum, pear, oak trees. So if you've got sycamore and big horse chestnut, far too big. If you've got birch trees, far too small. So actually, no hedgehogs could be because you don't have the right trees in your area. They exist on landscape scale. So this so our average UK garden is absolutely tiny compared to the amount that they need, which is why that school of thinking that hedgehogs just need maybe you and next door's back garden to exist happily is sort of being debunked. They need a huge amount to roam. They need about a mile certainly each night, and for that reason we would ask you to take part in the Hedgehog Highway campaign if you could, which I'll explain in a couple of slides. So main threats to keeping our head: roads kill and crossing roads. Yeah, hedgehogs are notoriously bad. They have no flight response or reflex, so fight or flight. That doesn't exist within them, their kind of behaviour. So they're going to curl up into a ball towards oncoming headlights, and it's only ever going to end one way. So that is one of the reasons that we do see a lot of hedgehogs on the roads. There's a PhD study being done into mortality rates on the roads at the minute, so we'll see the outcome of that. And again, that's where Project Splatter, aptly named as it is, but that's where that can come in handy. Got to be careful of strimming, using lawnmowers, especially in the summer months. Again, that the lack of the flight reflex ends in some nasty injuries, so that's something we're advocating for as well. There's a study also on litter entanglement, which is a really, really large threat. A lot of rescue centres report huge numbers of hedgehogs tangled in goals, especially like football goals, kiddies' goals in the back gardens, any kind of netting, so something to just think out about. And sadly, very pertinent for this time of year, bonfires. Lots and lots of hedgehogs losing their life at this time of year. You're creating perfect habitat, log piles, twigs, sticks and leaves, nice and dark, nice and quiet, and coming back the next night and set it on fire. So yeah, you'll see a lot in the media at this time of year trying to sort of advocate for safe ways to keep the hedgehogs safe. Things that you can do. Hedgehog Highway campaign, just a small hole in your fence is enough. We want to try and create connected wildlife corridors. If you think about an old school CD case, 13 by 13 centimetres, that's perfect, that's enough. Chop off the bottom of a plank of wood, snip through your wire fence, remove a brick, dig a channel. Please try and open up your landscape. You can also add your name to the Hedgehog Highway petition, which is nearly at 1 million signatures. So again, there's a lot of backing for the old hedgehogs. Think about rewilding. If you think back to that picture, we don't want to see so much of that going forward. Lots of messy corners, rewilding, having a meadow, not cutting back in winter. Lots and lots to get involved in. Even just a log pile, a leaf pile is perfect habitat to encourage invertebrates. Again, supplementary food. So meaty cat or dog food is perfect. Please, if you can, pop a little dish out for the hedgehogs with shallow water. Avoid mealworms where possible. There's not enough calcium kind of content. They're quite addictive for hedgehogs, so they can solely focus on them. They can look to your house every night for their mealworm fix, and they're not getting adequate nutrients elsewhere. And a hog home. Dead simple. You can buy them, you can make them, they can be the natural log pile. It's just a hibernation feature that can help encourage hedgehogs kind of in your area. And I am skipping through this at a rate of knots because I want to get on to the mammals. So how to help us: if you have seen a hedgehog, we've got this postcard style survey. My email address will be up for a long time at the end. Please send me an email. Where did you see it? When did you see it? What condition was it in? And for the location and for all mammals, again, talking about apps on the phone, This is called OS Locate. It's free, it's really simple, and it gives you the 6-digit grid reference code which we're after in almost all types of wildlife monitoring. So make a wee note there of that if you can. Get that onto your phone right now, it's great. I spoke to you about this, our sort of poor numbers of records and how much we've increased them by. So just evidence that citizen science does work. One final thing, if you would like to get involved, we have a garden survey which uses footprint tunnels, which we're going to talk about. So these can be collected from our Glasgow location, and we also have a very limited number of camera traps for anyone that's interested in monitoring mammals and wildlife in their own back garden. So again, email address up at the end, send me an email, let me know. What we're looking for are footprints of hedgehogs, which are fantastic. They're very cute. They look like human handprints, but they're very small and they're quite easy to identify. You can see all the vital data there. And even a bit of poo watch as well. So we'll talk about how to identify hedgehog poo as well. And if you've seen that in your garden, then you've definitely got presence of hedgehogs, and that's what we want to know about. So lots to think about there. And I'm sure some of you might want to get involved even further. So we have surveys on the ground, so spotlighting surveys, and this is all the different measurements that we're taking. We're trying to sex the hedgehog, add tags to the crown area of the head to help us identify them in the future. We take the circumference and also the weight of individual hedgehogs, and they become our monitoring population for years to come. So once COVID's out the way, you know, once we're all back to normal, we do actively recruit for teams of volunteers to help us on hedgehog surveys. So that might be something that you're interested in. Okay, let's talk about some common mammals and how we identify them. I appreciate I've taken the quiz and game element out of this because I've just given you all the answers, but this might help you a little bit later on. So some of the, if you're lucky enough, you might find skulls out and about, and there's some key things immediately that you can focus on. So right in the middle we've got our badgers. Badgers have what we call a sagittal crest. You see that really kind of clear ridge that's on top of the skull. So they have such powerful jaw muscles that basically the muscles attach to this crest, and it means they've got a lot of power for snuffling and sucking up earthworms, which is their kind of main diet. So they'll go through 200-300 earthworms per night per badger, sticking the nose in, making little snuffle holes in the ground and sucking up using those really strong kind of powerful front teeth as well. So that's the main thing that you want to look out for to identify badgers. Foxes over on the left-hand side, they've got a small sagittal crest, but they have an incredibly long snout, which you can hopefully detect there, which obviously just matches the picture of what we recognise in red foxes in the UK. They have exceptional vision, so there's a big sort of hollow space at the back of the skull for the eyes, and you'll notice the very, very prominent canine structure that you have in a fox skull as well. We can quickly chat about pine marten, which is almost the only time it's mentioned in this presentation, even though it is a wonderful and very pertinent Scottish species. They have this carnassial structure, so you can kind of see almost like triangles fitting together. It's a very standout sort of feature in carnivorous mammals. It's for shredding through meat. It's really prominent and will almost always help you to kind of identify pine marten skulls. You've got classic rodent shape down at the bottom. We've got red and grey squirrels. Greys by nature are slightly larger. That's reflected in the skull size. And it also reflects in some of the behaviour, which we'll talk about as well. But you know you're looking there, a rodent, you can see protruding forward, 2 front teeth there, classic squirrel shape. And right at the top, we have the roe deer skull, which is smaller than a red. One of the most common that you'll be finding. I don't suppose any of you would ever be in doubt when you find a deer skull, but it's good to just include it there. And what we could say is if you maybe find just the bottom jaw part, that you will find no sort of slicing teeth, none of the very prominent carnivore teeth. So if you can have a look, you'll see that deer, they're all about chewing and grinding down. They've got no need to be ripping and tearing. So looking at the teeth structure, in your deer teeth, this is very kind of flat and blunt teeth. I would like your input if you would like to type away to me in the chat box, so you can kind of go from top right, top left and down. Who's making these signs? What do you think? So if we focus on the top one, top left at the minute, who's made that?
So we've got a few badgers.
Mm-hmm. Only badger?
Yep, only badger so far.
Okay, fab. Yeah, you're absolutely 100%. D-shaped hole. It is wider than it is tall. It mimics the size of a badger's body exactly. What about moving over to the right-hand side?
Oh, we've got fox. Lots of foxes.
Yeah, fab. Tiny, very narrow, oval shape. Gonna be a fox, and it will absolutely stink to high heaven. What about if we move down and along, so back over to the left?
So we've got some rabbits. We've got one hare. Lots of rabbits.
Yeah, rabbit warren, absolutely. And you can contrast rabbit warren with what's on the right hand side?
Vole.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of rats as well.
Okay, very good. Yeah, vole is bang on. Vole has sort of like these little nibble holes, like very neatly mown lawn around, and a rabbit warren takes up sort of different topography and terrain and is very vast. But good, glad we're all on the same page. I appreciate like when you're actually out and about in the woodlands or wherever, it's not always as obvious. So some things that can help with the badger hole are looking for the spoil heap. So badgers are fastidious, very, very clean animals. You're looking, if you want to know that the set is in use, you want to look for the spoil heap of kind of earth and remains outside, and also fresh bedding. So they tend to change bedding, looking for softer materials, mosses and leaves that's being sort of changed every couple of days as well. Yeah, foxes taller than wide, very unpleasant, and often the remains of dinner left outside. So badgers, you're never going to find any bones or things like that. And we've talked about rabbit and vole holes as well. Fab, spot on. How do we feel about poo? let's do some poo chat, because droppings and scat, they might sometimes be the only clues that you have. So hit me up. Let's just start in a normal fashion along the top and then down the bottom. What do we think for the first one?
So we have badger for the first one.
Yes. And okay. And you're spot on. Why badger? Why are we saying that?
So Kevin said it's a latrine.
It is, yes. And what? Yeah. Anything else that would that we know this has definitely been made by a badger?
We have an answer from Kevin saying that its shape looks like a badger poo. Julio says their diet is mainly made of earthworms, so you're looking at very soft poo.
Yeah, that's the one I was after. Fab, you're all a bunch of experts here, lads. No need to be on the training. No, it's really good to see. So yeah, badgers have a sort of communal poo pile, a latrine as it were. They take it in turns in an order of hierarchy to kind of go to the toilet in the morning. As can't remember, sorry, who said it, but yeah, as you did rightly say, if your diet's made up of earthworms primarily, not a lot of roughage, not a lot of structure in there. So basically big sloppy piles of poo that are made in quite clear either drops in the ground or dug holes. It's going to be from a badger. What about second along? And sorry, there's no scale for this one.
So we have fox, hedgehog, deer.
What do you think, Emma?
Quite a few saying hedgehog.
Yeah, bang on. Again, it's quite hard to tell without the scale. So hedgehog poo, think back to the diet, it's going to have beetle caribidae in it, it's going to have remains. They're quite kind of squat and pretty solid. So yeah, nice one. So actually, let's just go below it.
We have pine marten, fox. Lots of people guessing fox.
Yeah, fab. So you got the predator twist, the noticeable twist in the poo there. Usually going to be full of hair, little kind of bones and fur, maybe some insects as well. And fox poo is going to be in a hugely prominent space. So they're all about marking territory. So these ones can tend to be quite noticeable when you're looking for tracks and signs. Quickly, the last two. So you can just tell me together, just say top and bottom.
So we've got rabbit and rat.
Take it rat for bottom. It's good. It's actually bat poo, but it does look very similar to mouse, and rat droppings, very soft and very crumbly. But the location is going to tell you probably more if you've got bat droppings. And At the top we actually have some deer scat as well, so they tend to kind of poo on the go, poo on the move, trying to find clumps sort of along the same transect line or in the same area, but clumped together as you go along. Oh, fab! I've got all the examples here. But yeah, we've pretty much been through that all. Scat, drop-ins, they're one of the main things that we're looking out for. I'm going to talk very quickly about a couple of key species, and we should say that I think we will probably be on plus Q&A for 2:15, but you're welcome to leave at any point. When we talk about the otter, and one of the surveys that we will hopefully be leading with you contains an otter survey. It's called Walk This Waterway. You're looking for spraints, so black kind of tar-like drop-ins in very, very prominent places. They're basically an otter's calling card to mark territory. So if you walk a transect line along one side of the river, there's a few key things you can look out for. And in your pack, you also have the otter survey guide as well. So things like fast flowing water, if the river kind of changes in topography, otters tend to not like passing through that. So they're probably going to get out, do a sprint, do a bit of territory marking and get back in. Any kind of key feature, is there a prominent rock that you can see? Trying to think like an otter, there's probably going to be some evidence of otters marking territory along the key features, and that's why when we're doing transect routes it can be quite easy once you've got your eye in to try and survey for these mammals. The spraints have almost, well, some people say pleasant smell, and I would tend to agree. It's kind of like sweet jasmine tea. And if they're fresh, that's what you're looking out for. Really clear tracks, that's fab otter tracks that we've got there. They cannot often be as easily identified as this, but you usually have the 5 toes there, if they've not been washed away, with distinct claw tips at the top as well and webbing between the toes. I think we've been over this and we've done it to death, but you can fire your answer in if you briefly want to. But these are the 4 main clues about the badger, of course, the European badger. So the things to look out for mainly are clear track lines in the landscape. You can usually see the badger's kind of journey from the sleeping area to the feeding area if you look closely enough. They're lugging those big bodies over grass and over logs, which is a nice one here of the kind of the scrape marks on the belly. You can see, so if there's a sort of fallen tree, a log, a landscape feature that's been there for a long time, it's basically come into the route of a badger who's been walking that same transect route, that same line day in, day out. It's not going to bother to move around it, it's just going to go right over the top. So over time, dragging the fur on the bottom of their belly causes bark and things to wear away, which is another key thing to look out for. We've got scratch marks, so using trees as scratching posts. Things like their guard hairs, so they've got those rough hairs on the outside that can catch easily, going under, going over features. It's good to try and look out for badger hair where you can, and really clear track marks as well. So they're usually quite sort of squat, they're going to be wider than they are tall, with the 5 kind of claw marks on the ends. And one thing also to look out for, sorry my images aren't the clearest, is snuffle holes. So we've talked about the diet of earthworms. You can imagine you're a badger, how are you best going to get to them? You stick that snout right in the ground and begin to suck up. So if coupled with some of these other features, you're seeing these divot marks in sort of the side of the pathways and into the soil, you've got badgers on your hands. You can look out for the latrines that we spoke about. There's 2 examples of that. So a small dug-in mark with poo inside. If we're talking about badger versus rabbit, yeah, we've got the D-shaped hole. Rabbit drop-ins are pretty much going to be everywhere around the outsides, and the tracks be very, very different. So rabbits will have thin darting tracks that tend to sort of zigzag about, say through a long field of grass, and your badger's just slowly walking the same line that he always has, maybe following linear features, really clear wide tracks to look out for. I wanted to cover the old grey-red debate. So red squirrels are native squirrels. What is quite funny is that contained within their sort of scientific name is the word vulgaris, which, as some of you might know, basically refers to common. So way back when the roles were obviously very much reversed, all we had was our red squirrel. It's in such abundance that they were considered common. In the sort of 19th century, when we introduced grey squirrels, this is when the problems started. So you might know that they don't directly fight or compete. That's not what the issue is. Grey squirrels carry a disease called squirrel pox, which is pretty much fatal to reds and has no impact almost on grey squirrels. So the signs are quite similar to maximatosis. So red swollen eyes, sores and ulcers. It's not very pleasant, but that is what's causing our main issue, coupled with the fact, if you think back to the skull size, greys are slightly larger and they're just ever so slightly, better at being squirrels. They can store their food better. They seem to have like more efficiency when they come back to cache that food and find it. But they do exist in two separate areas of the forest landscape. So we tend to find our reds certainly in Scotland in more kind of conifer forest areas. They existed and they sort of co-evolved alongside pine martens in this country, which makes them ever so slightly better at evading their main predator. So there is certainly lots of studies and lots of reports coming through that pine martens are kind of pushing out greys. They're a bit more cumbersome, they're slow on their feet, they come down to the ground level more often. Red squirrels, very agile, tops of the trees, quick on their feet. So there's kind of that the behavioural and adaptation aspects to the sort of pine marten and squirrel debate. So it'll be interesting to see as things progress where that one takes us. If you want to do a bit of squirrel surveying, which can be really, really interesting and very easy to get involved in, three things. One, you could create your own transect. If you're part of a woodland community group, this is really nice engagement activity. So we try and create that transect route through the trees with some key vantage points. You never want to look back on yourself because you want to avoid double counting. But if you can set yourself up a map, you're basically just looking for clear and distinct visual sightings of hedgehogs, of squirrels. So you maybe want to stop every 100 metres or so for about 5 minutes, listening, looking, staying really silent, noting down your sightings. You can also take part in sort of hair tube surveys, so you can make your own, you can buy these, and certainly some organisations like the Wildlife Trust, they do run these as well. So two different examples at the top, sticky pads, running along a plinth of wood inside a tunnel, some food inside, as your squirrel goes in, leaving some tiny little hairs behind. They then get analysed under about 400 times microscope, and they look very different. So the cross section of squirrel hairs, red squirrel have got a kind of kidney bean shape, whatever you want to call it, which is really, really standing apart from the oval shape of a grey squirrel. So hair tube surveys are something to also look out for. But the main thing, or I should say colour alone, we can't rely here if we're looking for presence of greys or reds, because you do get crossover in the fur colour. But one of the most easy citizen science surveys, which you might have heard of, Great Scottish Squirrel Survey, don't try and say that, end of September every year. So the Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels project are doing a big push to try and work out if grey squirrels are coming through some of those strong hold lines. We've got the kind of Highland hold line where we're trying to stop and monitor grey squirrels kind of breaking through. And there's also a line much further south along the borders in Scotland. So red squirrels do have strong holdings in certain areas, and contributing your data to this can be very valuable. The fox, we all know about the fox. The main thing to say here is to look out for fox prints and not confuse them with common dogs. So you can either draw a cross shape through the paw pads or a straight line under the top two. So foxes have this, hopefully you can see what I mean by the X shape. They're sort of slim and narrow, and you're able to easily define them, whereas dog prints, you're never going to be able to either draw an X shape or put a solid line through the print at any point. For foxes, we see them all the time. They're one of our most commonly sighted mammals, so no problems having a visual sighting of them. And of course, if you can smell them before you can see them. So a good way to know if a fox den is present. 1, 2, and 3, hit me up with your ID. What do we think? Going from left to right. Number 1, number 2, number 3. So the world of small mammals can be a little bit of a minefield, but these are quite common. Anything there, Emma?
Not yet, no guesses yet. Oh, we have a wood mouse, shrew, and then bankvole.
Okay. Any more for any more?
So everybody has so far said mouse, shrew, and vole.
Wonderful. Yeah, so Of course, we've got nice static images here. If we're looking at one of these little guys starting through the undergrowth, it can be pretty tricky. There's a little ID guide in your pack that basically focuses on ears, nose and tail, which can be a nice way to tell if something's moving at speed. Mice are always looking for naked tails, no fur, huge big ears. Voles the same size, but they've got really blunt faces and almost no visible ears that you can see. And then in the middle, shrews are teeny tiny and probably the most noticeable due to their body shape. Often you do see them dead at the side of paths, very easy prey for some, but very rarely eaten, so nice and easy to identify because they can secrete this foul tasting chemical, which I feel is sort of done the job too late if you're already dead but you've not been eaten. However, so mice, shrews and voles, among many others to look out for. Have anyone ever seen a mole? I'd be interested to know. Not a mole but an actual mole in your life. Crazy creatures, look at them there. I'd always love to see one. But we talk about the world of small mammals. There's lots to get stuck in with. You can use small mammal traps, but the footprint tunnels that I mentioned earlier are also great ways of confirming if you've had presence of any of these little guys in your garden. Had anyone seen a mole?
Yeah, actually quite a few people have seen a mole. Yeah,
wow.
In their garden.
And
some of us say they've seen a mole in France.
Okay, a French mole.
Yep.
Lovely. Very quickly, just going to finish up. So camera trapping is not best described over PowerPoint, as I'm sure you'll agree. I wanted to flag up that we have this specific type of camera trap available for public use and available through our lending library. It's the Bushnell Trophy Cam Essentials Pack. So most camera traps, trying to think of a few key points that we can mention right now. There's a lot on the market to look for. If you want to come in at beginner level, this one's absolutely perfect. I think it comes in about 149. Things to look out for are trigger speed. So this has 0.3 seconds on it. It also has low glow. So when you're strapping on your cameras, you're strategically placing them in the woodlands. Some of the cheaper models have a very prominent light, which can be off-putting and distracting to some animals, some not all. You also want to look at the flash range. So this one has about 30 meters on it, I think. So it can really capture some images still from that distance during the night time. Most of the sort of mid-range ones will come with anti-reflection shields. So that's more to try and protect from other humans who might be nosing around. Deflects sunlight from them, doesn't draw attention to your camera traps out in the fields. You can alter the settings on this one inside on a screen, so you can go between still images and record and moving pictures, black and white during the nighttime and full colour during the daytime. The image quality from this specific camera, in my opinion, is one of the better ones for the price. If you fancy, there's an organisation called My Nature Watch, and we run training courses in partnership with them, which offers you the chance to create your own. So we give you all the components that you need. I think you need to provide us with a housing case, which can be something as simple as a Tupperware tub. But we have in the past run training to try and create your own either daytime or nighttime wildlife camera, and that weighs in about £40, but does take patience. And I did lose my patience a few times with it. So if that sounds like you, then maybe not the one to go for, but it's a good little project to try. Maybe a good little lockdown project. My Nature Watch, do check them out. When we go out into the field, we'll be setting up camera traps, we'll be trying out a few types of our own, and then we'll be watching back some images, hopefully, of ones that were preset. So here's just a couple of, it's hedgehog copulation, but I doubt many of you have seen that. That was captured through one of our hedgehog volunteers, which we'd never have seen given the power of your camera traps. Just seeing what garden wildlife is getting up to. I spend a lot of my time banging on, yeah, hedgehogs need supplementary food. Leave out a small dish of water for them. People are saying, well, do they actually drink it? Yeah, of course they do. They rely on water heavily, especially throughout the summer months. And you just get lovely images like this to look back on. And finally, one thing that we say a lot in our hedgehog, sorry they're all hedgehog focused, but you might have noticed I'm biased, is this little guy. So this is the garden pond. He's at the back there, and in a couple of seconds in he goes. So hedgehogs can swim, they're partial to a little swim, in fact, but they can't swim forever. So we're just making sure that if you've got a garden pond, you've got a little exit route for hedgehogs and other wildlife to get out. But that's brilliant, a footage of a hedgehog swimming, and it was just taken on one of the regular camera traps in someone's garden. So it is worth the investment, and of course, like, a lot can happen during the night time that you might not have seen, so it's one way of contributing to wildlife records without physically having to stay up till 3 in the morning. So footprint tunnels, very important, lots and lots of great results that you can get. So the top picture there is tiny little hedgehog prints made from charcoal ink powder. So it's wildlife friendly, it's not going to stain either you or the animal. In the middle, that's me setting it up with a bit of a school group. So it's corrugated plastic sheeting, which you set 2 pieces of A4 paper at either end. You paint on the ink onto strips of masking tape to make an ink pad. And in the middle, you put some bait. So cat, dog food, hedgehog biscuits. Really simple. You can see it kind of set up in the triangle shape on the sides. The pack from us comes with the fold-out chart there from the FSC. It's great. It's an introduction to mammal footprints. 2 tent pegs. And sort of all the equipment you need to get that set up. In your packs, I've put some survey guidelines about this one, but yeah, hit me up if you fancy trying this in your garden, not just for hedgehogs like we've talked about. It comes with a full print guide to all different types of mammals that might use the tunnel. So yeah, just zooming in there on the hedgehog prints. That's what we're looking at. It's called Hogwarts Scotland Garden Survey, but of course it applies to lots of different species. So do let me know if you're interested. We're finishing on bats. We're nearly there, folks. I just wanted to add this in because it's a really good one to get involved with. Here in the UK, we have about 18 species of bats, 17 that we know to be breeding, and they're all fully protected. Talking about the FSC, so that's Field Studies Council for anyone that doesn't know, they produce these fold-out guides. They're about £2.50 to £3.50, and they are some of the best. They've taken out a big book with you in the field. It tells you different frequencies that bats operate on. It gives you, as you can see, a really clear identification guide to all our different species. And I'd definitely recommend investing in one of those. So every summer we do see a lot of people taking part in bat recording and monitoring. You can take part in hibernation surveys. So bats are now at the stage of hibernation. So unlike hedgehogs, they'll sort of go into that torpor state, a cool, constant temperature in their hibernation area. So things like caves, kind of in the UK, and they'll stay there right through until the sort of end of the spring next year. The hibernation, when I went on and checked, the hibernation surveys that you could do through the winter have been paused at the minute due to COVID. But I just wanted to highlight that what you can be doing on your own. So the idea was to have this course a little earlier in the year and use our bat detectors. They're a great investment again. So I'm going to just quickly talk through 2 of them. So the magenta bat detector, there's 4 and 5. You can see very, very easy to operate there. These work, they're heterodyne detectors, so they work by converting the ultrasonic calls from bats into sounds which are audible to our ears. So basically there at the side, you tune into the frequency. If you've got your guide with you, and it does also come with a guide, you can see the frequency sort of level for each different bat species. Tune in, you're holding your monitor in front of you, and you'll be able to hear that reflected back if one of those bats, the frequency that you're in is sort of flying by and is in the area. So the thing with these beginner ones is you need to pick. So you need to say that you're going to tune into pipistrelle and have a listen and then switch. There's more expensive models that sort of auto-detect. So they've got a digital screen, and as you kind of hold it up and walk your area, it'll be coming up and letting you know what it is. But really, really good for an introduction. So these 2 are the magenta. The only difference with the 5 is it's got that digital screen that you can see there. We use the 4. Prices £59 to £89. Bat scanner in the middle, that's the auto-tuning one. So yeah, that's basically tuning into frequencies for you. There's no fiddling around. It's a little bit more pricey, over £200, but if it's something that you think would be an investment, by all accounts, it's one of the best out there. So things to get involved in: head to the Bat Conservation Trust website. You can become a national monitoring volunteer. It's a really, really thorough programme, so you get training with this and you get to be out with some really knowledgeable people. If it's an introduction that you're after and you're interested in bats, I'd really recommend getting involved in a couple of these. The sunrise and sunset survey is something you can do from your own house as well. So I'm not going to go into it too much. All of these links, you can kind of peruse at your own leisure. And finally, when we get out and about, this is what we'll be doing. It's called Walk This Waterway. So we download the Mammal Mapper app, again, free onto your phone. It's kind of really well publicised at this time of year because, as we've discussed, mammals are so under-recorded. So we get that down onto the phone and we walk at least 600 metres of selected waterway. So we'll make up the transect area and we'll do it as a walking group. And we should be giving out these ID sheets as well. So we're looking for different tracks and signs of mammals that are most likely to be sort of on the waterway. And then we're going to contribute our records at the end of it. If you want to crack on and do it, if it's something that you're interested in, if you're part of a youth group or a community group, it's just on the mammalsociety.com and you can download the ID sheet. So that's something to look forward to. Thanks for bearing with the absolute whistle-stop tour. It's something that I really like to go into in detail, and I've got props and skulls and furs, and I've even got fake poo that you put droplets of scent on. It's all very interactive, so hopefully we can get out and do that. Give us a follow here on any of the platforms. That's where we announce our upcoming courses. Hedgehogs, they've got a website all of their own, but please do keep up with us, and then that's more of our general stuff there. Emma's information is on the left hand side. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. That's it for me.